Hey guys, welcome to The Good, The Bad, and The Story, where we talk about, well, the good, the bad, and the story about basically whatever I want, because, you know, my show and all that. Anyways, glad you guys are all here. So, have you guys seen RocketJump the show yet? I really hope you have, because I'm about to spoil the entire first episode. But if you want, don't forget to check out in the link down below. I think I put a link to the first episode, which is up on RocketJump's channel. So this is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to be analyzing the two parts of the show, which one is the making of all the shorts that they're doing, and the second one is the short itself. So they're going to kind of all be blending together. I hope you guys don't mind. If I get a little bit confusing, apologize ahead of time. Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I can do something to make that more clear next time around. So, RocketJump Episode 1, where the title of it is called RocketJump the Show, Episode 1. To start with the good. It's very honest. It's a very, very honest show. It reminds me, what do you mean it reminds me of? It basically is an extension of the RocketJump behind the scenes, or the old behind the scenes that were used to be on Freddie W2 channel, which is now Brandon JLA. And yeah, it's just very honest. It's just as Freddie and Matt described it, it's just a bunch of children running around making jokes and making movies and stuff, and it's actually very entertaining to watch. It's actually shot very well. If you notice that it's not shot like normal, not just like they're all behind the scenes, because obviously they got more of a budget behind it for the cameras and such, but also just in the way like it's not shot how even some documentaries are shot. It's shot in a way that tries to highlight what the characters are feeling in the moment. Like they approached it as you would any other film. So if a character is feeling kind of lost or alone, or they feel isolated from the group, then they'll shoot them like that. And it's kind of how, actually, a very good comparison would probably be RocketJump's other show, This Week at RocketJump, which also went for that pseudo documentary look, but also was shot more cinematically for a reason, because it was building a story and making jokes and stuff like that. So this show is shot very similar to that, where it's documentary-esque, but they're also going for a little bit more of a, they're going for a little bit more visual language, cinematic visual language there, which I really appreciate. It's kind of a nice little simple touch that makes the show a little bit more interesting to watch. Matt and Freddie are a match made in heaven, even though Matt's already married, but that's not what I mean. Watching Matt and Freddie work is like, as someone who wants to be a director and has worked as a solo director and has also worked as a co-directing with other people, that's like one of the most ideal directing situations that they have going on. They complement each other so well, and they're just kind of really funny to watch in general. I mean, it's just kind of, you know, they're just funny people. Like you would want to be their friend. That's the kind of vibe that you get off of them, and you would want to learn from them. I want to learn from them as a director. That's kind of why I'm really enjoying the show so far, is because I'm learning a lot. Let's see. Okay, cool. And so that kind of summarizes my good aspects of the documentary side of the show. And now for the short itself, which I don't remember the name. I'm sorry, for me, it wasn't a very memorable name. I'll put the title up here. Hopefully that makes up for it. So the hip-hop Western scene was fantastically creative. As soon as the sheriff, as she walks out of the saloon, and it just hits on like the hip-hop music, and they just start making like this grand parody of Fast and the Furious movies and like these urban racing movies. It's just pure fun. Like it's one like gut-busting gag after another, and I was just having a blast watching it, and just watching like how this would all play out in the 1800s, and it's kind of great. It shows both an understanding of how Westerns are truly have always been shot, and it's a combination of three elements. One, how Westerns have always been shot. There's a lot of shots very similar to most Westerns in the world. Two, it's a examination of how you would shoot a Western nowadays, with more modern techniques and more modern sensibilities in terms of camera movements or cutting or sound effects like that. And third, it's a great examination and they clearly have a great understanding of how the Fast and the Furious movies makes their movies, where they have a certain aesthetic to again, the way things are shot, the way things are edited, the way they're paced to the music and stuff, and it shows a great understanding of that. By transposing that to another setting, they show that they still understand why those can work and how they can find the parallels between the two. Like, oh, we don't have we have a horse instead of a car, so we can't rev the engine, but we can like show like close-ups of like the horse is sniffing up air as if it's like, you know, as if it's like the engine rumbling and stuff. They have very great parallels that aren't quite the same as what you would see, so it's not quite imitation, but it's a great understanding and a blending of all the formulas, which I really like. Again, more in that aesthetic. Love the screw it explosions. It's just like, why not? This whole thing is, it's kind of meant to be a parody and a joke anyway, so it doesn't have to quite make sense. One final thing I really enjoyed, and you know, I might get labeled as a SJW for this or whatever, but I don't really think so. It's just a small little moment that I like. That minorities, there are for the few characters that are in it, it's not a very long short. It's, well, I mean, it's like it's just a short, so they don't have a lot of time for a whole lot of characters. But I mean, you have quite a few minority characters and women who are some of the main stars, and the main bad guy is a white guy. And that's not saying all white guys are bad. I'm not getting at that. I'm just saying that that's a nice touch. But what's even greater touch than that is that it's not commented on. Like, there's not like Jimmy Wong, who's in it as an Asian guy. He just like, he doesn't like have like a funny accent, or he's not like making fun of the fact that he's an Asian in a Western. Same thing with another guy who works at RocketJump. I don't quite remember his name, but he's in it. But he's an African American guy, and there's no comments on like, oh, hey, we don't like your kind of people down here. And Ellery Porter, I think that's her name. Sorry, I'll put it right here. I'll put all their names right here as I'm talking about them. She plays the sheriff as a woman, but there's no comment on like saying like, oh, hey, you're just a woman, you don't deserve to be sheriff, or whatever like that, which is what pandering stuff does. Like, I don't like I'm not a huge fan of pandering, like, you know, a pandering representation where they make it a big point that, oh, the sheriff is a woman. It's just like, no, it's just how it is. Like, I'm sure if they did it another way, if they had other actors to cast, then they would make them the sheriff and something else. So it works out really well like that. I like subtle approaches to representation where it's not a key plot point, where it's not a key commented thing on. It's just part of the environment. It's just part of like the situation going on. Again, just a nice touch. I really enjoy that. Feel free to rage at me in the comments down below. Okay, so moving on to the bad. And the bad is kind of, it's not quite... Okay, let me just explain. It's not quite as technical as I would like, but I understand they have to make it for a self-accessible show for people who are not film nuts like me, who want to know all the intricate details. Maybe I can help that they'll release extended versions or like behind the scenes for their behind the scenes stuff that go into all the details of how they did some of the shots and how they edited it, or how they do post-production, or maybe post-production is going to be another episode in and of itself. I'm not quite sure, but for now it's a little bit too surface level for me, but I get it. It's not made specifically for me. It's made for a more broader, wider audience who isn't going to want all the technical details, so it's fine. The format is a bit spoilery, but I'm not quite sure how you would really resolve that. Like, by showing all the behind-the-scenes stuff before you actually show the short, you can guess at a lot of the major plot points and a lot of the shots that they're going to do because they're explaining it beforehand. But showing it after, I'm not sure would have like the same amount of impact. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure they experimented with it and they decided that this was the best way to go. For me, it just felt a little bit weird to already kind of know what the story was going to be going for exactly before it got there. The accents are, the Western accents are funny, but they don't quite work. They're just a little bit, yeah, it's just not quite. They come across a little bit too funny, unless that was the point. Maybe they were intentionally supposed to be funny, but yeah, they just didn't work for me. And on that note, one more technical thing. The green screen shots are definitely a lot more noticeable. I know that they're basically doing the same method that you do in the Fast and Furious movies or any racing movies. Whenever you have a close-up of a racing person in a movie, it's not them actually driving the car, it's them in a car in the back of a green screen, because that's the only way you could get a shot that stable and that safely. But it works a lot better in those movies because a car isn't moving up and down like the rhythm of a horse, and it just doesn't work as well here. The green screen shots are much more noticeable. It didn't completely take me out of the experience, like it's like, oh, shitty green screen kind of thing, but it's like, it just doesn't work. There's not really much you could have done with that because they are horses instead of cars, but yeah, it just didn't quite work as much. where it kind of has a bit of a problem is the tone. The tone is a little bit all over the place because most of the time and all the strong points happen when it's just clearly being a Western parody of a Fast and the Furious story or race kind of thing. And that's great. That's fine. That's where the core of the joke was. If you looked at the behind the scenes, that's what they were going for. Just shoot a Western a way you've never seen it before with a Fast and the Furious twinge to it to kind of be a parody of it, or to just kind of draw absurdist humor by seeing a Fast and the Furious scene in a Western, which I get it. It's great. The problem is that when they try to go back and forth between a parody and a drama, and it doesn't quite work. But like the I don't have time to go into all of it, but the most noticeable one was the flashback sequences as Ellery was riding back to finally win the race and stuff, and she was having flashbacks of like friends that she talked to and like Jimmy dying for some reason, I guess, but he's still in the crowd, so it didn't quite make sense. Like, those are very traditional dramatic moments that just don't quite work as well here, because the whole rest of the production is trying to be joking and have a good time. So it's just a little bit of a mismatch in tone that just doesn't quite work for me. But maybe that's just me. Maybe you guys found it different. Moving on to the story aspects. Okay, so story for these ones are going to be a bit different than my Ruby ones because it's not talking about a continuation story, so it's going to be more talking about thematic elements or story beats that I kind of really liked. The idea was great and solid and mostly works. Like I said, like for the most part, the short works and it's pretty funny overall. There are some areas where it falls short, as I mentioned, but ultimately looking back on it, it's kind of understandable. That's actually one of the benefits of having the behind the scenes stuff too, is that it allows a viewer to look in and realize like, oh, okay, like that's why, because it's a budget constraint. It's just an issue with the production. It's an issue with just things happening that are outside of your control or are outside of the scope of what you want to do. And that's what I've always found most irritating about some other reviewers or just some other people who just randomly comment on videos, is that they'll be like, oh, this is stupid, you just copped out here, like you just did the cheap and easy route here. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, because you have to understand every production in it, even the worst movie you've ever seen in your life, had people who probably put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and probably had to cut things they really desperately wanted to have in order to make it possible to make it at all. So that's not to excuse a bad movie. A movie can be bad, a film can be bad, any piece of art can be terrible, and you can say it. But it's really, but I've always found it very, very arrogant for people to come up and say, like, oh, this is just terrible, as if, well, you could do better, or as if, like, they decided to make a bad movie. That's never the case. More often than not, a filmmaker and the crew will fight as hard as they can to make the best product possible, because that's what their incentive is, to make the best product possible. But I like the behind-the-scenes aspects because we get to see why that's not always possible, why there are some shortcomings that happen, and it's just a constraint of budget or time or people being stupid or stuff like that. One example of this is the GoPros. The GoPro, they brought in the GoPros to do this kind of bullet time effect thing, like Matrix style effect, and it doesn't quite work, mostly because they don't have enough GoPros, which, again, like, you know, they already have like 15 GoPros on a bar, so it's kind of weird to make fun. It's kind of weird to complain about that, but I felt like it needed to be longer, or it needed to be in a curve around the shot for it to work, but right now it was just too short that it just didn't quite pull it off. It just didn't quite work for me. And that's what I mean. Like, if they had infinite budget, they could obviously get, 20,000 GoPros and stick them along the entire track, but they're limited, and they did the best with what they had. So I like that aspect of it, that they help explain why certain things don't always come together, but not making an excuse for why a short doesn't work. It's just like a reality of production, which I can understand and relate to. One final thing is that Freddie comments towards the end of the documentary section that a film is not the director's sole vision, and that it involves everybody in the process. Like, how a director will not always be involved with every small decision that gets to make, and a movie really hinges on individual people making individual decisions to make the movie great. I understand where he's coming from, and I mostly agree with what he's saying, but I also have a feeling that he's kind of underselling what he and Matt do, because as a person who's worked on productions where I was just a grip, or I was a lighting person, or I was working as a semi-DP or a camera operator, and I've also worked on sets where I was the director, I kind of have a little bit, I don't have more of an understanding than these guys do. Clearly, they have much more experience than me, but I do have some insight on what it means to be at least a low-budget director, and that he's right. A movie is made based on the individual decisions and the individual aspects of everybody involved. You could have the best director in the world and a terrible art department or a terrible set design department, and the film will probably suck because the set design looks terrible and there's nothing the director can really do about it because his set designer sucks, or a set designer just doesn't care enough to try. So I get that. It's about everybody. I kind of got a little lost in my thought. Let me just back up and summarize this really quick. A director is still very important, though, and I have a feeling Freddie is underselling what he and Matt do, because the director's job on a set, as I've found it and as I've observed from directors that I've shadowed, is that they have a vision involved, and while everybody is off making their own decisions to make it as great as possible, to make the film as good as possible, a director still has to come in and help mold everybody to create a coherent vision. Otherwise, it becomes disjointed and separated and doesn't quite work out as well. So he's right. A film is made by multiple people, but I also have a feeling he's underselling how important he and Matt work as directors and how important any director is in a film. But I get what he's going for, in that fact that like a director is not the sole person behind a film, which it often feels like that in Hollywood. It often feels like in Hollywood you only care about the director and the actors involved. Maybe if you're like an industry savvy person, you'll care about like a certain sound designer or a DP or maybe a writer if you're lucky. But I mean, like I would say 99 out of 100 people who go to see a movie don't care about how like the art department and like what their names were, or the set designers, or even people like the second AC or the first AD. They won't care as much because they don't know that those people were so integral to making the production. And I like how he kind of goes into that, and how this film is kind of highlighting that there's more to it than just the directors, even though the directors should be the most important voice on the film. So yeah, ultimately, I think it's a really great start to the season. I'm looking forward to the other ones. Next one up I'll be doing is their second episode with Fan Friction, which I'm already going to tell you right now is probably it's one of the two best shorts I've seen this year. It's really, really funny. It's really great. It's very creative. Granted, if you have experience with that particular subsect of the geek community, but that's getting ahead of myself. We'll talk about that next time. See you guys. Hey guys, sorry I forgot to record an outro beforehand, but hope you enjoyed that. I'll be bringing you more RocketJump coverage later next week or this week, whenever I basically have time. I don't get paid for this, so I only do this when I have the free time to do so. Anyways, though, like I said, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to click here, where I talk about Ruby, which is another online web series, animated, put up by Rooster Teeth. Hope you like that. And right here is a short film. Which one am I gonna put there? Singing in the Pain. This is my this is a short film a couple of friends and I made about a year ago, for a 48-hour film competition. It's about depression. It was kind of our little tribute to Robin Williams when he passed. So sorry about the quality here. I'm GoProing it, like just holding it in my hands. Woo, motion sickness. Yeah. Alright, see you guys next time.